Ashley awoke early in the morning to bright sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of her bedroom. It was another warm summer day in Denver. She stretched sleepily and carefully climbed out of bed, trying not to wake Tom. Her husband was sleeping peacefully next to her, his even breathing barely audible. Ashley quietly threw a light robe over her shoulders and, walking barefoot on the cool wooden floor, went into the kitchen. In the kitchen, she pressed the button on the coffee machine with a familiar motion. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee quickly filled the small, cozy kitchen. While the machine was humming, Ashley looked out the window. The first passers-by with dogs were already running along the street. Someone was walking a Labrador along the quiet, green street of their neighborhood. The neighbor across the street took the morning newspaper out of the mailbox. A typical morning in a quiet suburb of Denver. Ashley took eggs and bacon out of the fridge and decided to make breakfast. Tom loved her scrambled eggs with crispy bacon in the morning. She moved confidently around the kitchen, automatically. Frying pan, butter, a little salt. While the eggs were sizzling in the frying pan, footsteps were heard. Tom woke up. "Good morning," a sleepy voice came from the door. Tom, a tall, strong man of 27, in a wrinkled t-shirt and lounge pants, leaned against the doorframe, watching his wife with a warm smile. "Good morning," Ashley said, turning and smiling at him. "The coffee is ready. Should I pour you some?" "Sure, thanks," Tom said, stepping closer. He put one arm around Ashley's waist and peered over his shoulder at the stove. "Smells great." Ashley paused for a moment, feeling his closeness. Tom was always affectionate in the mornings. She appreciated this stability. Every day began almost the same way: breakfast together, light, encouraging conversations before work. She wanted to maintain this familiar routine. She put the bacon and eggs on 2 plates. Tom sat at the small dining table by the window. Ashley placed the plate and a cup of steaming coffee in front of him. Then she sat down opposite him with her portion. "What are your plans for today?" Tom asked, taking a bite of bacon. "Nothing much, I suppose," she said with a shrug. She had no extra work to do at her job at the advertising agency. "I'll work until 5, then maybe stop by the supermarket. We're almost out of milk." Tom nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "Okay, I can buy some myself, by the way, on the way home from work if you're late." No, it's okay. It's even good for me to go out for groceries," Ashley smiled. She liked that Tom was always ready to help and take some of the chores on himself. He was a reliable partner in everything. There was a brief pause. The morning sun glinted off the table, and the kitchen was quiet and peaceful. Ashley glanced at a framed photograph on the shelf above the table. It was of her and Tom hugging in front of the Colorado mountains from their summer hike. They looked happy. Ashley felt like her life had finally found the stability it had been missing. Before, another face involuntarily popped into her memory: Chris. Old feelings responded with a slight sting. Once, several years ago, she dated Chris, a passionate and talented musician. That relationship was like a whirlwind, bright but unstable. After another quarrel, they broke up. This was before she met Tom. Tom became the complete opposite: calm, caring. She felt safe with him. "What are you thinking about?" Tom's voice was heard. Ashley blinked, bringing herself back to the present from her thoughts. Tom was looking at her with a slightly worried expression. "Sorry, I was daydreaming." She smiled tensely and started eating. "I remembered how we went to the mountains last year." Tom smiled immediately, distracted from her strange expression. "It was a great hike. We should do it again sometime." "Yes, of course," Ashley nodded, looking down at her plate. She was grateful for Tom. He had surrounded her with love and care, given her a sense of stability, something that Chris had not provided. But why then, she sometimes wondered, did she feel a vague uneasiness? Sometimes at night she looked at Tom sleeping and felt guilty for this very dissatisfaction. She had nothing to wish for: a loving husband, a cozy home, the prospect of having children. Perhaps her restless nature or the shadows of the past were to blame. Having finished breakfast, Tom rose from the table and, going up to Ashley, kissed her on the forehead. "Thank you for breakfast. I have to get ready." He went to get dressed, and Ashley began to clear away the dishes. An ordinary morning, an ordinary life. She had another ordinary day ahead of her, in which, it seemed, nothing unusual should happen. A few days after that quiet morning, life went on as usual. On a Friday night, as the work week was winding down, Ashley's friend Jessica invited her to go out to a popular bar in downtown Denver. Jessica was Ashley's coworker at an advertising agency, and they often spent Friday nights together unless they had other plans. "Well, shall we go? There's some live music there today. It'll be fun," Jessica insisted, popping into Ashley's office toward the end of the workday. Ashley was hesitant. She was used to spending evenings at home with Tom, watching movies or reading, especially after a long week. But Tom was busy that evening, mentioning that he would be at the office for a meeting, so a little distraction outside the house seemed like a good idea. "I guess so, why not?" Ashley finally agreed, smiling. "Come on, I love live music." A couple of hours later, they were entering the lively Blue Mesa bar in the Lodo area. It was noisy inside. Rock music was playing in the background, people were talking in loud voices. Jessica immediately squeezed her way to the bar to order them cocktails. Ashley looked around. The interior was decorated in a cowboy-themed guitars and photos of musicians hung on the walls. Dim lamplight fell on wooden tables. At the far end of the room, a small stage was visible, curtained with dark blue velvet. "Here," Jessica returned with 2 glasses. "Your favorite mojito." Ashley gratefully accepted the glass and took a sip. The sweet and sour taste of mint and lime refreshed her after the day's hustle and bustle. The girls found a free table near the stage. Jessica chatted about small things, office gossip, where she was planning to go on vacation. Ashley listened with half an ear, relaxing under the influence of the music and alcohol. Soon the lights in the hall were dimmed. The host appeared on stage, announcing that a local band was about to perform. Ashley turned away from Jessica and looked at the stage, expecting to see unfamiliar musicians. However, when the curtain opened slightly and the performers came out on stage, her heart stopped for a moment. In the spotlight, she recognized a figure with a guitar, that same confident tilt of the head, disheveled dark hair. "It can't be." The guitarist approached the microphone. Ashley peered closely. Yes, it was Chris. That same Chris, her ex-boyfriend, whom she hadn't seen for almost 3 years. He had changed a little, he had matured, grown a light stubble, but his features were painfully familiar. Ashley felt her palms sweat. She mechanically put the glass down on the table. Jessica was talking next to her, not noticing her condition. The band started playing. The room filled with the sounds of a guitar riff and drums. Chris sang Ashley would recognize his voice out of 1,000, slightly hoarse, emotional. She sat as if in a dream, not believing her eyes and ears. All the memories of the time spent with Chris came flooding back at once. Their night rides on a motorcycle, heated arguments, reconciliations to the chords of a guitar. The song ended with the audience applauding. Ashley snapped out of it, realizing she was applauding too, though her heart was pounding. She glanced at Jessica, who finally noticed her friend's expression. "Hey, are you okay?" Jessica asked, leaning in to be heard over the noise. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Ashley swallowed. "Maybe so," she muttered. "See the singer? That's my ex." "What?" Jessica's eyes widened. "That Chris? The one you were telling me about?" Ashley nodded, her eyes fixed on the stage as Chris moved into the next song. She had almost forgotten how charismatic he looked when he played. His whole person radiated the energy that she had once loved and feared at the same time. "What a coincidence," Jessica whistled. "So how are you? Are you okay?" Ashley didn't know what to say. It was hard to sort out her own feelings. Shock, excitement, even joy all mixed up. She just whispered, "I didn't expect to meet him." After 3 songs, the show ended. Chris bowed and thanked the audience. The musicians began to put away their instruments. The audience dispersed, some for more drinks, some to go outside to smoke. Ashley sat in confusion. Part of her wanted to leave immediately until Chris noticed her. But another part, bolder and more curious, held her in place. "Do you want to talk to him?" Jessica asked carefully. She knew it wasn't easy for her friend. Ashley ran her hand through her hair uncertainly. "I don't even know. I guess I should say hello. It's been so long, after all." "I'll go get more," Jessica said tactfully. "I'm nearby if you need anything." Jessica retreated to the bar, and Ashley remained at the table, frantically thinking about what to say to her ex if he came over. It felt like an eternity, although in reality it was only a couple of minutes, when Chris appeared at the stage with his guitar in a case over his shoulder. He said goodbye to someone in the band and began to walk across the room, right in the direction of the table where Ashley was sitting. When their eyes met, Chris slowed down for a moment, apparently recognizing her. His eyes widened in surprise, then a familiar smile lit up his face. "Ashley," he said loudly, over the hum of voices around him. Ashley stood up, feeling her knees shaking. "Hey, Chris." He came closer. Now they were face to face. Chris glanced at her quickly, as if to make sure it was really her. "What a meeting. I can't believe it. How many years, how many winters." He laughed, and Ashley heard genuine joy in his voice. "I'm surprised too." Ashley tried to smile, feeling awkward. "You're performing here. I didn't know you were back in Denver." "Well, I didn't really know that I'd be back." Chris shrugged. "Just passing through. Gave a concert, thought I'd visit old friends. And here I am, meeting an old friend. How are you? You look great." Ashley felt her cheeks warm. Chris had a way of throwing her off balance with compliments, and the years had not made him lose it. "Thank you. I'm fine. Work, home." She hesitated, unsure whether to mention her husband. Then she added, "I'm married." A shadow passed over Chris's face, but he quickly smiled again. "Oh, well, congratulations. I'm happy for you." "Thank you," Ashley nodded, looking down. There was a moment of silence. The music in the bar changed to recordings, and the noise of conversations returned. Chris was the first to break the pause. "Maybe we should sit down. Tell me how life is." They sat down at a table. Ashley pushed her half-finished cocktail aside. Her heart was still beating too fast. "So, what are you doing now?" she asked, trying to speak calmly. "The same." Chris tapped his fingers on the guitar case. "Music, touring." "Well, I came back from a tour for a couple of weeks, decided to stay a little longer in my native land, to see what has changed." "I see." Ashley didn't know what to say. It seemed incredible to her to be sitting next to Chris and making small talk, as if there was no past between them. Chris acted as if he was happy to just meet an old friend. He told a couple of funny stories from the tour. Ashley couldn't help but smile. Gradually, the initial numbness passed. She said that she worked in advertising, lived in the same Denver. She didn't specifically mention Tom anymore, but showed her wedding ring to remind her that she now had a family. "Well, times are changing," Chris sighed, looking at the ring. "I remember you as a little girl, a dreamer, and now you're a respectable married lady." Ashley snorted. "I'm only 25, so how respectable?" Chris chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "You know, this look suits you. The calm, the confidence. You used to be on edge a lot." Ashley shrugged. "The quiet life is good for me." "I'm glad to hear it." Chris looked her straight in the eyes. "Are you really happy?" The question was unexpectedly direct. Ashley was taken aback. "Yes, of course. I have a wonderful husband." "Then that's great." He looked away, examining the pattern on the table. "It means everything worked out as it should." Another awkward silence. Ashley suddenly realized that she wanted to ask him, "Are you happy?" But she didn't dare. Jessica appeared next to him, a fresh cocktail in her hand. She glanced at Chris, then looked questioningly at Ashley. Ashley introduced them, briefly explaining that they were old acquaintances. "Nice to meet you," Chris said politely, standing up. "I'd love to chat some more, but I think I've got to go. I've got a lot of work to do." Whether he was lying out of habit or was genuinely in a hurry, Ashley didn't understand, but she felt both relief and disappointment. "It was nice seeing you," she said sincerely. "Likewise, Ash." Chris smiled his trademark mischievous smile. "Take care, okay? And maybe we'll cross paths again." He paused, as if considering, then leaned over and gave her a quick goodbye kiss on the cheek. Before Ashley could react, he had already taken a step back. "Bye," Chris said and turned around, quickly walking towards the exit. Ashley watched him go, trying to comprehend that this amazing meeting had now ended as suddenly as it had begun. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked quietly, sitting down next to him. Ashley looked away from the door Chris had disappeared through. "I don't know. Facing the past was harder than I thought." She took her glass with a trembling hand and took a sip, feeling the alcoholic taste bring her back to reality. Chris had disappeared from sight, but her heart was still beating, and a strange feeling was growing in her chest, either melancholy or inspiration from a flash of old emotions. That night, Ashley was silent on the way home. Jessica, driving, glanced at her sideways, but did not ask questions. At home, Ashley forced herself to calm down before going inside. Tom was already home and asleep, tired from work. Ashley lay down quietly next to him, looking at the ceiling. Chris's face and his question, "Are you really happy?" kept popping into her mind. She loved Tom, Ashley told herself. She had a good life. So why was there a niggling sense of confusion deep inside her? Was one chance encounter really going to destroy her confidence in her choice? She closed her eyes, trying to push the thoughts away. But somewhere inside, she was worried that this story wasn't over yet. The next day, after the unexpected meeting, Ashley couldn't stop thinking about it for a minute. In the morning, she woke up exhausted. She had barely slept at night, tossing and turning and remembering the conversation with Chris. Tom noticed her tired appearance at breakfast. "Did you sleep badly?" he asked solicitously, pouring her some orange juice. Ashley shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just a little headache last night. It's all good now." Tom suggested that she stay home to rest, but she refused. Work helped her to distract herself. However, Ashley had difficulty concentrating at work too. The scene in the bar kept appearing before her eyes. Chris singing on stage, then sitting opposite, staring into her eyes. And most importantly, his question stuck in her memory. "Are you really happy?" Later that afternoon, while Ashley was sorting through her emails on her computer, her phone vibrated quietly on her desk. She glanced at it, an unfamiliar number. Ashley picked it up cautiously. "Hello?" "Hi, it's me again," a familiar voice said. Ashley's heart jumped. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. It's Chris." She quickly glanced around to see if any colleagues were nearby and quietly replied, "Oh, hi. How did you get my number?" Chris chuckled. "I was looking through an old phone book. Just kidding. Remember Mike? I asked him for your contact information." Mike, a mutual friend from the old group of friends. Ashley closed her eyes slightly. "Of course, Chris will find a way if he wants to." "I see," she said neutrally. "Why are you calling?" There was a sigh on the other end of the line. "I know, yesterday was a bit of a mess. I was glad to see you, and I thought maybe we could talk quietly somewhere. Reminisce about old times at least, if you don't mind, of course." Ashley's grip on the phone tightened. She should have said no right away. Why stir up the past? But instead she asked, "You mean meet?" "Well, yes. For example, over a cup of coffee. Today after work, if you can." Ashley mechanically straightened the sheets of paper on the table, trying to control the trembling in her fingers. "I don't even know, Chris." She imagined Tom's face, his trusting eyes. He didn't suspect anything. Meeting an ex for coffee, was that some kind of cheating? But just talking. "I understand," Chris's voice took on a conciliatory tone. "You're a married woman, maybe it's inconvenient. Decide for yourself, I'm not insisting. It would just be nice not to lose touch so suddenly again." Ashley was silent for a few seconds, biting her lip. Then, as if she hadn't expected it, she heard her own voice. Okay, let's try to meet. Chris perked up. Great. Do you know the Highland Coffee on 32nd Street? I know, I've been there. Let's do it at, say, 6 in the evening, right after work. Okay, at 6, Ashley confirmed quietly. See you later, Ash, he said with obvious relief and hung up. Ashley put the phone down and covered her face with her hands. Her heart was pounding. What was she doing? She should have said no. But what was done was done. She told herself she would just put an end to this. She would see Chris, make sure the past had no power, and then go home to her husband. In the evening, having asked to leave work at exactly 5, Ashley nervously packed her bag. She had warned Tom in advance by text message that she would be late. Jessica had invited her to sit in a cafe after work. Tom had replied that she should not worry and rest, he would heat up the dinner himself. The message contained a smiley and a heart. This almost hurt Ashley. Tom trusted her, and she was deceiving him. But she was just going to meet a friend, she reassured herself. Highland Coffee was not far from her office, on the corner of a busy street. It was a cute place with brick walls and big windows, popular with young professionals. Ashley arrived a little earlier and grabbed a table by the window. Outside, the evening Denver was living its own life. People were hurrying home from work, cars were honking, the pre-sunset sun was golden in the sky. She ordered a latte and waited, nervously fiddling with a napkin. Chris showed up almost on time. He was wearing a leather jacket and dark jeans, and had the same guitar case over his shoulder. Apparently, he never parted with his instrument. Chris looked around, noticed her, and immediately smiled, heading to the table. Ashley stood up to greet him. Hi. Hey, Chris gave her a quick, friendly hug. He smelled of mint gum and light men's perfume. I'm glad you came. They sat down. Chris put the guitar next to the chair. The waitress came. He ordered a black Americano, remembering that he does not like sweet coffee. How was your day? Chris asked, trying to lighten the mood. Ashley noticed that he was a little nervous, too. His fingers were tapping on the table. Not bad, it's just a job, she shrugged. And you? I have a day off today. I slept for half a day, then played the guitar a little. I'm meeting you in the evening. He smiled with the corner of his mouth. Ashley couldn't help but smile too. It's like a rock star's schedule. The coffee arrived. There was a pause. They looked at each other. Chris was the first to start a conversation on the subject. Look, I was really happy to see you yesterday. So many years. You've always been a special person to me, Ash. Ashley looked down at her cup. It was a surprise for me to see you too. I've thought about you a lot, you know, he continued, twirling the cup in his hands. I've often wondered where you are, if you're happy. Really? She looked at him with distrust. We hardly talked after the breakup. I know, it's my fault. I said too much then. I was a fool. Then my pride didn't allow me to apologize, and then you disappeared from sight. Ashley remembered those hard days after their breakup, how she was exhausted from the pain and decided to break all ties, even moved, changed her number. She sighed slightly. We were both intemperate. Well, that's all in the past. Are you really happy with him? Chris suddenly asked quietly, looking straight into her face. Ashley tensed. Chris. Sorry, I can't help but ask. He raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. It's just that all last night I couldn't get the thought out of my head. What if you're unhappy? I made a lot of mistakes. I'm fine, she said more firmly. Tom is a very good man. I owe him a lot. He suits you, doesn't he? Chris peered at her inquisitively, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Ashley felt irritated. Chris, what do you want to hear? That I regret something? I have my own life, you have yours. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. Sure, sorry, didn't mean to pry. They drank their coffee in silence for a few minutes, the tension acutely palpable. Finally, Chris spoke again, changing his tone to a calmer one. You know, I also tried to build a serious relationship after you. Nothing worked out. Surprise, Ashley noted with slight irony. Chris smiled wryly. Yeah, right. Musicians are an unreliable bunch, as you once rightly noted. The memory flashed through both of their minds. She had actually said this to him during one of their arguments. Ashley suddenly felt ashamed of her former Barb. That's not what I meant. It's okay, he waved it off. I deserved it. It's just. After you, no one lasted long. I was always comparing them to you, I guess. Ashley felt a lump in her throat. Chris, please, don't. He covered her hand with his own. Sorry, I'll say it for the last time and shut up about it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm a fool to lose you. Ashley froze, feeling the warmth of his hand. She needed to pull hers away, but for some reason her fingers wouldn't obey. Her heart began to beat treacherously in her chest again. She said quietly, "The past cannot be returned." Chris slowly removed his hand, looking closely at her face. I know, and the future, it doesn't matter. He smiled sadly and leaned back. Ashley suddenly realized that it hurt her to see him like this, confused, with a shadow of sadness. She was used to Chris always looking forward boldly, living in the moment. Tell me where you're performing now. She tried to change the subject. You probably have a lot of fans, right? Chris understood her attempt to distract herself and supported her. He began to tell about his tour of small towns, about staying in cheap motels, funny incidents with fans. Ashley laughed, listening to his stories. The tension dissipated, they again talked like old friends. When the cups were empty and it was getting dark outside, Ashley glanced at her watch. It was already about 8. I have to go, she sighed. She would have delayed longer, but there was no further to go. Tom was waiting at home. Chris nodded, though his eyes were filled with regret. Yeah, sure. Thanks for meeting up. They stood up. They stopped at the exit of the cafe to say goodbye. Ashley suddenly didn't know how to act. Shake hands? Hug? Chris was also hesitating. In the end, they awkwardly hugged, patting each other on the back, more in a friendly way. Take care, Chris whispered into her hair. Ashley squeezed her eyes shut for a second, memorizing the moment, then let go. You too, and good luck with the music. They went their separate ways, Chris to his parked motorcycle, Ashley to her car. She felt herself shaking as she got behind the wheel. Oh my God, what am I doing? She thought. On the way home, she tried to think of what she would say to Tom. In the end, she decided to just mention that she had spent the evening with Jessica. It was disgusting to lie, but she couldn't tell the truth. Tom really didn't suspect anything. At home, everything went on as usual. They ate the pasta he'd left for dinner, watched the late news. Tom told her about his business. Ashley nodded and smiled in the right places, feeling how everything inside her was screaming with tension. For the first time, there was an invisible wall between the spouses, at least that's how Ashley felt. Lying in bed that night with her back to Tom, she opened her phone and stared at the screen for a long time, not knowing what she was looking for. There were no new messages from anyone. She was surprised at herself. Sometimes she wanted Chris to write again, sometimes, on the contrary, she hoped not to hear from him again, so that she could return to normal life. But normal life was falling apart. Deep down, she already knew that the dangerous fire of the past had flared up again, and she was reaching for its warmth, even though she knew she might get burned. Another week passed. Ashley tried to live as usual, to convince herself that meeting Chris was a short episode that shouldn't change anything. She avoided mentioning him even to herself. But every time her phone vibrated with a message, her heart sank in hope or fear of seeing his name. Chris wrote a few days after their conversation in the cafe. He thanked her for meeting and said that he was leaving on tour in a week, but would really like to see her again, if that was okay with her. Ashley read the message, feeling her insides turning over. She didn't answer right away. A few hours of torment and finally a short, "I'm not sure this is a good idea." To which she almost immediately responded, "I understand. If you decide, let me know. Otherwise, good luck to you, Ash." Politely and without pressure. Those words stung for some reason. The thought that Chris would leave, and they might never see each other again, left a strange emptiness inside. Ashley was angry at herself for this weakness, but she couldn't do anything about it. The situation was resolved unexpectedly. Tom was going to visit his cousin in a neighboring state for the weekend to help him move. He offered Ashley to go with him, but she refused, citing accumulated work and fatigue. Tom left early Saturday morning, kissing his wife goodbye and promising to return by Sunday evening. Left alone, Ashley walked around the empty house for a long time, feeling lost. She cleaned, watched TV, but nothing helped to distract herself. By Saturday evening, the tension reached its limit. She constantly thought about Chris leaving soon. This uncertainty tormented her. Finally, around 7 o'clock, she gathered her courage. With trembling fingers, she found his message on her phone and wrote, "Are you still in town?" The reply came almost immediately, "Yes, tonight is our last night here." "Where are you?" she texted. "At a bar on South Broadway. We're having a little concert. Are you coming?" Ashley stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her ears. A minute later, she replied, "Yes." It was already dark when she parked near the bar she had specified. The place was called Broken Drum, a typical music pub with neon signs. Ashley was afraid to go in alone, but something drove her forward. Inside, it was crowded. A band was playing on stage, people were crowded at the bar. In the semi-darkness, she did not notice Chris at first. Squeezing forward, she saw him on stage. He was just tuning his guitar before the performance. Ashley stopped in the crowd. Chris looked up, and as if sensing her presence, he looked around the room. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod and a smile, then returned to the microphone. The performance lasted almost an hour. Ashley listened, trying to contain the overwhelming emotions. Chris played with such passion today, as if he was saying goodbye to the stage. Their eyes met several times. Ashley felt dizzy, either from the stuffiness or from the internal tension. Finally, the concert ended. Chris said something to the audience as they applauded, but Ashley couldn't hear it. The blood was rushing in her ears. She felt that something important was being decided. About 15 minutes later, Chris came down into the hall, making his way through the crowd towards her. He looked excited and happy at the same time. "You came," he said quietly, but so that she heard. "She's here," Ashley echoed, barely keeping the tremor from her voice. "Thank you, that means a lot to me." Chris put his hand on her back, guiding her toward the exit, away from the noise. "Let's get out of here, there's no room to talk." The night air was cool outside, and Ashley breathed easier after the stuffy bar. They walked to the side, where it was quiet under a street lamp. A few people were leaving the bar, laughing and lighting cigarettes. Chris looked at her intently, his eyes shining in the dim light. "I'm glad you decided to see me." Ashley wrapped her arms around herself nervously. "I don't know why, probably to say goodbye." The words sounded ambiguous. Chris stepped closer. "Say goodbye." She looked away. "You're leaving, after all." "Yes, tomorrow morning," he confirmed softly. "But now I'm here." For a few seconds, they stood almost touching each other. Ashley could hear her own heartbeat. Her whole being was torn between fear and desire. Chris reached out and gently touched a strand of her hair. "Ash." His quiet voice and closeness finally broke the last barriers. Ashley felt her eyes fill with tears, and the next moment Chris hugged her, pulling her close. She did not resist. Their lips met in a kiss, at first timidly, then more and more greedily. The city was noisy around them. Cars were driving by, but they heard and saw nothing but each other. When the kiss broke, Ashley exhaled loudly, trying to compose herself. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but her fingers slid down his cheek on their own. "I know," Chris answered just as quietly, pressing his forehead to hers. "But I want to see you, just today, please." The last word sounded almost like a plea. Ashley closed her eyes. Her mind screamed that this was madness, but her body and heart had already made up their minds. "Let's go to my place," Chris whispered, looking into her eyes. as if seeking consent. She nodded almost imperceptibly. They reached his rented apartment on the outskirts, where Chris had temporarily settled for the duration of the concerts. Ashley followed his motorcycle in her car the whole way, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. There was emptiness in her head and thousands of thoughts at the same time. I'm making a mistake. The last time, and that's it. The apartment turned out to be a small studio in an old brick house. As soon as they entered and closed the door, they reached out to each other again. Chris kissed her as if he was afraid of losing her again. Ashley responded with no less passion, pouring out all the suppressed melancholy that had lived inside her all these years without him. In the dim light of the room, they found their way to the bed, leaving their clothes on the floor behind them. Ashley thought of nothing but how much she needed this man right now. The night turned into a kaleidoscope of emotions and sensations. They loved each other as if there had been no long separation, as if they were those young lovers again, as before. Later, late at night, Ashley lay next to Chris under the rumpled sheets, listening to his breathing even out. She turned her head and looked at him. He had already dozed off, his arms around her, his features soft and peaceful in the moonlight. For a moment, Ashley felt a sharp tenderness. She wanted to stop time, to stay like this forever. But reality was coming back. The clock on the nightstand was blinking almost 3 o'clock in the morning. Ashley carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Chris. She began to collect the scattered things. Conscience was slowly descending on her like a heavy weight. What had she done? Finding her clothes, Ashley quietly put them on. Chris stirred and opened his eyes. "Are you leaving?" His voice sounded hoarse from sleep. Ashley froze, pulling on her jeans. I need to go home. Tom's coming home tomorrow, I can't." Chris sat up, covering himself with a sheet. His eyes were sad. "I understand." He ran his hand over his face as if to drive away sleep and stood up, throwing the blanket over his hips. "I'll take you." "No need, I have a car," she said quickly, picking up her bag. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other in silence. Ashley wanted to say something, but she didn't know what words were appropriate. "Sorry." "Thank you." None of it felt right. Chris himself broke the silence. I don't regret it, you know." Ashley's eyes filled with tears again. "Me too, but I'm scared." He slowly walked over and hugged her, pressing her against his bare torso. "Me too, but everything will be fine." Ashley closed her eyes, memorizing the warmth of his body. Then she gently pulled away. "Goodbye, Chris." "Goodbye, Ashley," he replied quietly. She turned and walked out the door as long as she could. As she walked down the creaky steps to the street, Ashley felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Two feelings fought in her soul: painful remorse, and at the same time, a strange, painful happiness from this night. The drive home took half an hour. All this time, Ashley tried not to cry out loud. She needed to pull herself together, because tomorrow her husband would return, and she would have to look him in the eyes. She stopped the car outside her house around 4 in the morning and sat in silence for a few minutes. It won't happen again, she told herself firmly. It was a mistake, the last time. She wanted so badly to believe that this would be the end of it. On Sunday morning, Tom returned home as promised. Ashley tried to greet him as usual with a smile and a warm kiss. Tom, not suspecting anything, happily hugged his wife, telling her how his brother's move went. Ashley listened, nodded, gave him a cup of tea. She tried to look calm, although inside everything was constricted with guilt. It seemed to her that Tom could read the terrible truth from her gaze alone. So she avoided direct eye contact, twirled around the kitchen, setting the table for late breakfast. To drown out her tormenting thoughts, she asked him questions about the road, about her brother. Tom happily told her, not noticing her tension. "How are you doing here alone?" he asked casually, buttering his toast. "Did you at least get some rest?" "Yeah, everything's fine," Ashley answered quickly. "I watched a movie yesterday and went to bed early. Today I got up early and decided to make some pancakes." "Great, I missed your pancakes," Tom smiled, unaware that Ashley was just talking. After breakfast, Tom suggested a walk in the park, since the weather was nice. Ashley agreed she wanted to escape from the house, where every corner now reminded her of her betrayal. They walked to the nearest park, holding hands. Tom chatted about his plans for work, about how he would like to go to the sea with her in the summer. Ashley listened, nodding, and tried her best to act natural, smiling at jokes, answering questions. But somewhere deep inside, she felt empty and fake. Her loving husband, her good, reliable Tom, was walking next to her, and she was hiding this disgusting act from him. Sometimes she wanted to burst into tears right in the middle of the alley and tell him everything, begging him to forgive her. But the fear was stronger, the fear of losing him, of ruining their lives. "I can handle this myself," she repeated silently. "It was a mistake, but I won't let it ruin everything. The main thing is to forget it and never repeat it again." In the following days, Ashley did everything she could to push the memories of what had happened deep inside. She deleted her correspondence with Chris, blacklisted his number so that she wouldn't be tempted. Chris, however, didn't write apparently. He really had gone on tour, as he had said. On his social media page, Ashley secretly checked in several times. He posted a photo from another city, commenting on the concert. It hurt her to see it, and she tried not to check in anymore. Home life gradually returned to normal. Tom didn't notice anything, at least at first. Ashley even became a slightly more diligent wife than before. She regularly cooked his favorite dishes, suggested going out together on weekends. She tried to atone for her guilt with care and attention. In the evenings, lying in bed, she would cuddle up to Tom, close her eyes, and convince herself that she loved him. And it was true, she loved her husband. It was just that now the love was mixed with a bitter sense of her own meanness. Sometimes Tom would ask if she was okay. He thought she was worried about something. Ashley would blame it on stress at work, smiling and kissing him to distract him. Little by little, it seemed, life would get better. However, about a month after that fateful night, Ashley began to notice strange changes. At first, she didn't pay attention when she felt slightly nauseous in the morning. She decided that she had eaten something wrong. Then she suddenly realized that her next period was already several days late. Her heart sank. She immediately dismissed the panicked thoughts, convincing herself that it was just a nervous breakdown. But the days passed, and those days never came. Ashley began to notice other symptoms. Her breasts became more sensitive, and she felt sicker in the mornings than before. One day, she barely held back the urge to vomit. While making breakfast, the smell of fried eggs caused a sudden wave of nausea. Tom didn't notice, absorbed in reading the news at the table. Ashley was growing terrified. She didn't dare even think about what it could mean. But one evening, alone, Tom had gone for a run. She took out her phone and, with trembling hands, typed "early pregnancy symptoms" into the search engine. Reading through the list of symptoms, she realized that almost everything matched. Ashley was walking around the house in a panic. What if she was pregnant? It couldn't be. Although why couldn't it be one unprotected night with Chris, and here it was? No, maybe the child was Tom's. She and her husband had been close in those days too. Her thoughts were chaotically rushing about. Finally, she realized that there was no point in guessing any further. She needed to know for sure. The next day, on her way home from work, Ashley stopped at a drugstore in another area. She was afraid to take the test at the nearest one who knows who might see. She bought 3 different tests at once and hid them in her bag. At home, locked in the bathroom, she barely waited for the morning tests are recommended to be done on morning urine for accuracy to conduct the first test. Her hands were shaking so much that it was difficult to wait the required minutes without looking. When she finally looked at the strip, the world before her eyes wobbled. 2 clear, bright lines. Positive. Ashley didn't believe it and immediately took a second test. The result was the same. The third one repeated the same picture. She sat down on the edge of the tub, feeling the ground slipping out from under her feet. Pregnant. She was going to have a baby. Tears began to flow down her cheeks, tears of horror and joy at the same time. Somewhere deep inside, happiness was simmering, mixed with shock. After all, she had long thought that it would be nice to have a baby. Tom had also mentioned it. But this pregnancy had not happened as she had dreamed. Now, beneath the joy, fear was raging. Whose child is it? This was the question Ashley dreaded the most. She counted the days, remembering that night with Chris seemed to fall in the middle of her cycle. But she and Tom were also close, both a couple of days before leaving and right after his return. They both had a chance. The baby is probably Tom's, Ashley convinced herself, frantically wiping away tears. It has to be Tom's. That thought was the only straw she could cling to. If the baby turned out to be Tom's, then it wouldn't be so bad. She would keep the family together. No one would ever know about the betrayal. Ashley decided not to tell anyone. Just enjoy the pregnancy, like a wife should. Time would tell if anything went wrong. No, don't think about it. She took a deep breath and looked in the mirror at her pale reflection. She needed to pull herself together. That evening, she told Tom the news. Her husband reacted as expected. First, he froze with a disbelieving smile. Then, when it dawned on him, he picked her up and twirled her around the room. He was happy, kissing her, repeating, "Am I really going to be a dad?" Ashley laughed and cried at the same time, trying to share his joy. In those moments, she, too, almost believed that everything would be fine. Tom immediately suggested making an appointment with a doctor the next day to confirm everything officially. Ashley agreed, hiding her trepidation. She was afraid that the doctor would guess the due date based on some signs, and Tom would compare the dates. But there was nothing to be done. The visit was necessary. At the appointment, the doctor confirmed the pregnancy at about 6 weeks. Tom held Ashley's hand, his eyes shining with pride and excitement. Ashley also tried to smile, asked questions about nutrition, vitamins, as expected. She noticed that the doctor named the expected date of birth about the end of May. Ashley quickly calculated that means conception took place at the end of August. Tom was away then, but they were close right after his return at the beginning of September. It could have happened then, too. She did these calculations secretly, in parallel with the conversation. Tom, of course, did not suspect anything. He was too happy about the future child. Back home, they sat together on the couch, Tom still holding her hand. He made plans how to arrange the nursery, what to tell the parents. Ashley played along, although inside she felt a little sick. The doctor's calculations confirmed her worst fears. There was a high probability that the baby was Chris's. But for now, it was just a guess. She tried to believe that fate would not play such a cruel joke on her, and that the baby would turn out to be Tom's. Thus began a new stage of life, the expectation of a child, darkened for Ashley by constant fear, which she carefully concealed under the mask of a happy future mother. Ashley's pregnancy was relatively calm as she entered the second trimester. The nausea gradually subsided, and she was finally able to fully enjoy her condition, at least in public. At home, everything was going well. Tom surrounded her with care, indulged her whims, read articles about expectant fathers. He seemed the embodiment of happiness and pride, telling his friends that he was going to be a dad soon. Ashley smiled, holding his hand, and played the role of a happy mother-to-be. Sometimes, in those moments, she almost believed that everything was fine. But as soon as she was alone, fear rolled in. At night, she woke up in a cold sweat from nightmares in which the child suddenly had Chris's face, and Tom turned away from her in horror. When she woke up, she cried quietly, trying not to wake her husband. In the middle of the pregnancy, they went for a routine ultrasound to find out the sex of the baby. The doctor announced with a smile that it would be a boy. Tom almost jumped for joy, squeezing his wife's hand. Ashley also smiled and even cried with emotion, looking at the baby's fuzzy outline on the monitor. In those moments, she felt genuine happiness. A new life was growing inside her. She swore to herself that she would do everything to make this child happy and loved, no matter who his biological father was. The news about the boy was reported to relatives. Tom's parents, who lived in another state, sent congratulations and promised to come closer to the birth. Ashley had fewer relatives. She grew up with a single mother, and she now lived far away, unable to visit often. but Tom had a large family. On Thanksgiving Day, the couple went to Tom's aunt, where all the relatives traditionally gathered. The table at Auntie's house was lively, with discussions of Ashley's pregnancy and playful arguments about who the baby would look like. Ashley laughed along with everyone else, although she felt a little uneasy under the close attention of her husband's many relatives. She tried to stay close to Tom, as if seeking protection in his presence. "Tom, thank you again for helping us move in August," Tom's cousin Mark said suddenly from across the room. "We couldn't have done it over the weekend without you." Ashley, hearing the word August, tensed up and almost dropped her fork. Tom, chewing a piece of turkey, responded good-naturedly. "Come on, Mark, it's not a problem. Your family. By the way, it's funny," the aunt continued with a smile. "When is your baby expected? At the end of May, I think?" "Around May 28th, Tom confirmed, taking Ashley's hand with a smile. "The doctor said so." "So, you conceived in the fall," another relative chimed in. "September, probably, or the end of August." Mark did not let up, narrowing his eyes slyly. "Tom was working like a bee at the end of August, I remember. Maybe he would go home for a couple of hours, and even then there was hardly time for romance. Ha ha." Mark said this jokingly, without putting any hidden meaning into it. Several people around the table laughed. Tom chuckled too. "Hey, what details?" he said, pretending to be indignant in the same tone as the joke. Ashley felt the blood drain from her face. She looked down at her plate, afraid that someone would notice her paleness. Mark's words hit her like a hammer. Tom was with us at the end of August. Which meant, she calculated in a panic, yes, that very weekend when everything happened, Tom really did spend with his brother. And if conception happened then, he wasn't there. She felt sick, and for a moment she was afraid that she was going to puke right there at the table. Ashley suppressed her panic with difficulty and forced a smile, hoping to blend in with the general merriment. "Well, the baby might come a little earlier or later," she quickly interjected, trying to sound casual. "You can never tell in these things." "That's true," the aunt nodded, and the conversation switched to other topics. Ashley spent the rest of the evening on autopilot, trying not to think about Mark's throwaway phrase. But inside, everything was shaking. She noticed that Tom had calmed down, become somehow thoughtful. Maybe he had figured it out too. No, Tom, of course, was laughing then. It was unlikely that he had taken his brother's words seriously. After all, he was sure that the child was his. On the way home at night, Tom held the wheel and Ashley looked out the window, trying to hide her excitement. Several times she caught herself studying her husband's profile out of the corner of her eye. Was he too tense? Was he frowning? Tom really did look lost in thought. Finally, when they were approaching the house, he suddenly asked, "How are you feeling? Are you very tired?" "A little," she responded, becoming wary. "Why?" "No, I just noticed that you turned pale at dinner when Mark was joking. Were you feeling unwell?" Ashley's heart jumped. He noticed. She quickly laughed. "Oh, he started talking about moving so abruptly. I remembered how sick we were from the paint when they were painting the walls. And then a wave of nausea rolled in, pregnancy." She hoped the excuse sounded convincing. Tom glanced at her and nodded. "I see. I was worried that you might have been offended by something." "No, no, everything is fine," she assured. "I'm just tired and nervous." Tom asked no more, but his silence was more disturbing to Ashley than any words. As she went to bed that night, she tried to convince herself that she was overreacting. But doubt crept in. What if Tom suspected something? Weeks passed. Life went on. The baby kicked more and more noticeably. Ashley went to classes for expectant mothers. Tom sometimes accompanied her. Everything seemed normal, but Ashley began to notice changes in her husband's behavior. Sometimes she caught him looking at her thoughtfully when he thought she wasn't looking. He became more attentive to details, asked a lot of questions about her health, her plans for the day. A couple of times he even unexpectedly stopped by to pick her up from work, although he had never done that before. When asked directly if he was okay, Tom answered with a smile that he was just worried about her and the baby. Maybe that was true, but Ashley's intuition told her that her husband was becoming wary, as if a suspicion had arisen in his ideal world, which he was trying to either confirm or dispel. Ashley did everything to dispel the fear. She surrounded Tom with even more care, tried to be open and calm. She talked at length about how her day had gone, so that he would not have the feeling that she was hiding something. She even suggested that they go to a psychologist for pregnant couples together. She knew that this would impress him, like she was serious about their future. Tom gratefully accepted her efforts. For a moment, Ashley thought the crisis had passed and everything had worked out. They chose a crib together again, argued over a name for their son. They couldn't agree on one. She suggested more modern ones. Tom was leaning towards the classic ones. These were happy, simple moments. Only occasionally did bitterness roll in. Did they have a future, these plans, if the truth came out? Ashley silently prayed that fate would spare her and that all of Tom's doubts would dissipate like fog. The due date was approaching. By the end of the 9th month, Ashley felt heavy and tired. Tom was always there. He helped around the house, insisted that she go on maternity leave early, and went grocery shopping himself. Together, they packed a bag for the hospital and placed it at the entrance so that everything would be ready when the hour X arrived. Ashley was nervous before the birth, like any first-time mother. But she was even more afraid of what would come after. Sometimes she caught herself thinking, what if something goes wrong and I still don't love this child if it's not Tom's? These thoughts terrified her, and she drove them away. Of course he would love it, it was her baby, no matter what. And yet her conscience gnawed at her. Late one night, a couple of weeks before the due date, Ashley's water broke. It happened suddenly. She woke up with a dull ache in her stomach, and immediately warm moisture soaked the sheets. Her heart leapt with a mixture of fear and joy. It seemed to have begun. Tom, she called, touching her husband on the shoulder. He started, waking up. What happened? It's time. The water broke. Ashley breathed out, trying to stay calm, although everything inside was shaking. Tom jumped up immediately, instantly waking up. Oh God, okay. Breathe deeply. Now, I'll get the bag. He bustled around the bedroom, putting on his jeans, then helped Ashley up. The contractions were still weak, but she already felt a nagging pain. Tom supported her under the elbow, led her to the car. The night was dark, quiet, the stars twinkled in the sky. Ashley couldn't help but think that their son had chosen a beautiful time to come into the world. In the maternity ward, everything was spinning. Contractions were getting stronger. Doctors were examining her, asking questions. Tom did not leave her side, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her forehead. Ashley screamed in pain, but he whispered that everything would work out, that she would cope. At these moments, she saw only his eyes, full of love and anxiety, and thought, how could I hurt him? Why didn't I appreciate what I have right away? After several hours of intense effort, a loud scream was heard. Ashley fell back against the pillows, feeling tears streaming from her eyes. Our son flashed through her mind. It seemed as if her soul had left her body in relief. Congratulations, you're having a boy, the midwife announced. The baby was quickly examined and, wrapped in a swaddling cloth, placed on her mother's chest. Ashley looked at the tiny wrinkled face with bated breath. The little man with closed eyes was searching for something with his lips, a warm lump on her chest. At that moment, she was overcome by an all-consuming feeling of love and tenderness. This was her child, her son. Tom was stroking her hair next to her. Ashley turned her tear-stained but happy face to him. Tom also shed tears, smiling, and kissed her forehead. Thank you, he whispered hoarsely. You gave me a son. These words pierced Ashley's heart with a sweet pain. She only nodded, unable to speak, holding the baby close. The first time after the birth passed in a fog of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless feedings. Ashley was discharged 3 days later. Everything was already prepared at home. A crib, diapers, cute wallpaper with teddy bears in the corner of the nursery. Tom was running around as if on wings, carefully holding the baby, changing diapers expertly. He took a couple of weeks off from work to help his wife. Ashley watched her husband rock their son, and her heart ached with both love and longing. She noticed that Tom had become a little quieter and more serious since the birth of their son. She attributed it to fatigue and new responsibility, but sometimes she caught him looking thoughtfully at the baby, as if he was pondering something. One night, when her son was about a week old, Ashley woke up and saw that the bed next to her was empty. The baby was also silent, which meant he was calm. She got up and went into the nursery. In the dim light of the nightlight, she saw a touching scene. Tom was sitting in a rocking chair, holding the sleeping baby in his arms and rocking slightly. His face was tired, there was stubble on his cheeks, but his gaze was focused. Ashley came quietly. "Why didn't you wake me?" she asked in a whisper. "I would have fed him." Tom didn't look up. He was just tossing and turning. I picked him up to calm him down. "You were sleeping so soundly, I decided to give you some rest." She put her hand on his shoulder, looking at her son, who was peacefully snoring. "Thank you." They were silent for a few minutes. Then Tom suddenly said, very quietly, "He's so small, defenseless." "Yeah," Ashley smiled. "Our dear boy." Tom nodded but said nothing. Ashley sensed the tension coming from her husband. She asked cautiously, "Are you okay? You hardly sleep yourself. Do you have enough strength?" He finally looked up at her, his eyes filled with deep-seated worry. "You know, I always think, what he will grow up to be, who he will look like." "Looks like?" Ashley laughed weakly, sitting down on the arm of the chair. "Look at your nose, I think." She said it on purpose, hoping to hear the usual happy response, but Tom only smiled sadly. "Seriously? I don't know. It's hard for me to say." Ashley felt a chill run through her insides. This conversation was terrifying. She quietly suggested, "Let's put him back to bed. You need to sleep." Tom obediently stood up, and together they put the baby in the crib. The child stirred slightly, then fell asleep again, sucking his fist in his sleep. Back in the bedroom, Tom lay down, turning on his side. Usually, they would cuddle before going to sleep, but now he pulled away. Ashley lay there, looking at his back, and knew that something was coming. Tom could no longer hide his doubts. She prepared herself for the worst, although she still hoped that it was just her imagination. The next evening, after the friends and neighbors who had dropped in to congratulate him on the new baby had left, Tom suddenly said, "We need to talk, Ashley." Her heart began to beat in her throat. "About what?" "About our son," he said tensely, looking straight at her. Ashley instinctively pressed her hand to her chest. "Is there something wrong with him? You're scaring me." Tom took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to scare you, but I have to ask, are you sure he's healthy?" "No, he's not." He paused, apparently choosing his words. "Are you sure he's ours? Mine?" The last word hung in the air like thunder. Ashley felt the world around her crumble. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Tom, what are you saying?" she whispered finally, trying to feign shock. Tom clenched his jaw. "I need to know for sure that this is my child." "Of course it's your child," Ashley shouted too sharply, her voice shaking. "What makes you think that?" "Why?" Tom raised his voice, then caught himself and looked back at the bedroom door, where the baby was sleeping in a crib. He continued more quietly, but firmly, "Because the dates don't add up, Ashley. I've recalculated everything. And also," he swallowed, clearly suffering from each word, "I also know that you dated Chris." Ashley turned pale and felt sick. "What?" "Don't try to deny it," Tom snapped. "Your friend Jessica mentioned to me that you saw him at a bar once. And I'm not stupid, Ash. I've seen how you've changed since then. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Ashley realized that everything was falling apart, but the instinct for self-preservation made her cling to the lie. "Yes, I did meet Chris by chance, but it didn't mean anything. We just exchanged a few words, and that's it." Tom stared, unblinking. "Really? And nothing more?" Nothing, she cried, feeling panic choking her throat. Tom, how can you doubt it? Haven't I been a good wife to you? I was, he said sadly, until I started lying. Ashley burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Please believe that our son is yours. I would never. She couldn't finish. Tom was silent for a while, then exhaled. Maybe I'm wrong, and I really want to be wrong. But one thought won't let me rest, and there's only one way to gain confidence. Ashley slowly lowered her hands, sobbing. What do you want to do? Tom said almost in a whisper, but mercilessly. DNA test. For paternity. These words sounded like a death sentence. Ashley froze at the words. For a few moments she was silent, hoping she had misheard. But Tom's expression left no doubt. He was determined. No, no, Tom, please, she finally said in a hoarse voice. No test. It's an insult to me, to our son. Do you really think that I think I want to know the truth, Tom answered firmly. If you have nothing to hide, the test will only confirm your words. But, Ashley faltered. Her arguments were drowned in panic. She reached out to her husband. Beloved, believe me. Tom took a step back, avoiding her touch. I'd like to believe you, but I can't. There's too much weirdness, Ashley. Please, don't make it complicated. I need to know. Tears streamed down Ashley's face. She realized that persuasion was useless. Tom would not rest until he got an answer, and inside, she already knew what that answer would be. That night, they barely slept. Tom settled into the spare room, citing that he needed to think. Ashley lay in their empty marital bed, listening through the wall as their son periodically whined in his crib, and Tom got up to soothe him. Usually she did, but now Tom seemed to have separated her from the child, taking him to himself. They barely spoke in the morning. Tom called the private lab himself and found out the procedure. It turned out he could come today. Ashley quietly pulled herself together and put on the first sweater she could find. Her head was splitting, she had barely slept a wink. Tom looked no better, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. Together, they took their son to the lab. The procedure took only a few minutes. A swab was taken from the baby's mouth, and a sample of cells from Tom's cheek. Ashley sat in the hallway, unable to find a place for herself. It seemed strange to her what was happening. They, like strangers, were checking whether the child was their own. On the way back, Tom drove silently, looking ahead. Ashley decided to break the tense silence. How soon will the results be available? They promised in a week, he answered briefly, without taking his eyes off the road. A week. 7 days of an agonizing, unknown future. Ashley knew that in 7 days her life would most likely collapse completely, but she still tried to cling to hope. What if the test showed Tom was the father? After all, there was a chance, albeit a ghostly one. Tom. She spoke quietly again. What are we going to do if... when the results come in? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. We'll see how it goes. If everything is okay there. She swallowed. Promise that we will forget this nightmare and never return to it again. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again without taking his eyes off the road. If everything is okay, I will beg your forgiveness on my knees for my doubts, and we will try to live on. Ashley sighed and nodded. And if not? Her lips barely formed the words. Tom said nothing, but she could tell by the way his face had hardened that he had already made up his mind if the worst came to pass. The days of waiting became torture for Ashley. Tom continued to sleep separately and hardly spoke to her. They maintained the appearance of normality only in front of strangers. A nurse from the home care came to check on the baby. A neighbor dropped in with a homemade casserole to congratulate on the birth. In public, Tom behaved kindly, calling himself a happy father. But as soon as they were alone, an oppressive silence hung in the air. Ashley tried to start a conversation several times, but Tom pulled away. Let's wait for the results. He didn't even let her hug him. He slept lightly, locked the door to the guest room. It killed her, but she understood she deserved it. Every night she cried, burying her face in her pillow, praying for a miracle. In the morning, she put on a mask for her son, picked him up, fed him, rocked him. Sometimes it seemed to her the baby was looking at her inquisitively, as if sensing the tension. At such moments, she quietly whispered, "Forgive me, darling, forgive me." Tom also spent a lot of time with the child, and there was no anger or alienation in his treatment of the boy. On the contrary, he was gentle and caring. Only with Ashley did he keep his distance, as if she could infect him with something. Finally, on the seventh day, Tom's phone rang in the middle of the morning. Ashley recognized the lab number he had saved in his contacts. She froze in place, holding her son, who was just feeding from a bottle of expressed milk. Tom, sitting across from her, met her eyes, then pressed answer with a trembling hand. "Yes, it's me," he squeezed out. "Yes, I'm ready to listen." In the silence that followed, Ashley could only hear her heart. Her son smacked his lips as he drank milk, unsuspecting. Tom didn't listen for long, maybe 30 seconds. His face was tense at first, emotionless. Then his eyes froze, he closed them, lowering his head. "I see. Thank you," he said hoarsely before hanging up. Ashley felt her legs giving out. She carefully removed the bottle from her son's mouth, and he whined in surprise. She placed him in his bouncer next to her and stood up with difficulty, walking over to her husband. "Tom," she breathed out, already understanding everything from his look. Tom didn't move. The phone fell from his hands onto the sofa. Finally, he raised his head. A mask of pain and disappointment froze on his face. "He's not mine," he said, barely audible. "The test. Confirmed. I'm not the father." Ashley staggered as if struck. "Tom, Tom, I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her with a dull look. "So it's true?" His voice broke. "You cheated on me with him?" There was a pleading tone in his tone, as if he still hoped for an acquittal. But there was no acquittal. Ashley burst into tears. She tried to touch his hand, but he pulled away, rising from the couch. Then she knelt down in front of him, sobbing. "Forgive me. I cannot be forgiven. It happened once, just once. I didn't want to lose you. I loved you. I love you." Tom looked down, tears glistening on his eyelashes, but he made no attempt to lift her up. "So it was Chris after all," he said quietly, as if putting an end to it. Ashley covered her face with her hands, continuing to beg. "I was weak. It's a mistake, a mistake. But the child, I thought it was yours. I wanted to believe." "Enough," he cut her off in a trembling voice. "Get up." She shook her head, unable to look him in the face. Then Tom, clenching his fists, shouted. "Get up," I said. The baby in the lounge chair was frightened by a loud scream and burst into tears. Ashley perked up, got to her feet, and rushed to her son to calm him down. She automatically began rocking the chair, saying, quietly, "My love." Tom turned away, wiping his tearful eyes with his sleeve. For a few minutes, the room was filled with the sound of the baby crying and Ashley's sobbing. Finally, the baby fell silent again, burying his face in her chest. "I never meant to hurt him," Tom said quietly, still with his back to her. "I loved that little boy from the second I knew about him." Ashley buried her nose in her son's fluffy hair, sobbing silently. She didn't dare say anything. But now, Tom turned around, his face distorted with pain. "Every time I look at him, I'll remember your lie." "Tom," she moaned, "don't leave us, I beg you." Tom just shook his head, as if he couldn't believe that this life was his. He slowly walked out of the room, leaving Ashley standing there with the baby in her arms, feeling her own world crumble completely. Tom didn't disappear from their lives at that moment, at least not physically. He locked himself in the guest room, avoiding Ashley. There was an oppressive silence for several hours. The son fell asleep after feeding, lulled by his mother's tears. Ashley sat in the living room, clutching the baby, as if she was afraid that if she let go, she would lose him too. She tried to collect her thoughts, but only one was pounding in her head. "He's leaving. Tom is leaving. Towards evening, the door of the guest room opened. Tom stood on the threshold with a travel bag in his hand. He looked lost, his eyes dull. Ashley jumped to her feet, still holding the baby. "Tom," she breathed. He looked away. "I can't stay here, Ashley." Her heart sank. "Please, don't go. Let's talk some more. Give me a chance to fix everything." "Fix it?" He smiled bitterly. "How can I fix the fact that our son is not my son? That my wife lied to me for so many months?" Ashley burst into tears again. "I know it's my fault, but we can. I'll do whatever you say. Just stay. Don't leave us alone with the baby." Tom tightened his grip on the strap of his bag, his fingers white. "Us?" he repeated quietly. "I loved this little boy with all my soul, but I can't. I look at him and I see you and him. You and him. He's not guilty of anything," she pleaded. "He's a child, Tom, an innocent child. You were like a father to him from the first minute. You said so yourself." Tom closed his eyes, fighting his emotions. "Don't push me. I'm in enough pain as it is." He took a step towards the exit. Ashley stepped closer in desperation, blocking his way, even though her knees were buckling. "Where are you going? Will you come back?" "I don't know," he answered after a pause. "I need to be alone to think." "But what about us?" Ashley nodded at her son, who was starting to wake up and was peacefully snoring in her arms. "You—" Tom glanced at the child, and tenderness flashed in his eyes, immediately replaced by pain. "Take care of him. He's your son. You're his father too, even if not his biological one," she cried out, not expecting it from herself. "You've been raising him these days. He's gotten used to you." "Don't say that," Tom snapped, wincing as if from a blow. I don't know anything yet." "This is my child too," he whispered, looking down at the boy. "But how should I be him? I don't know." Ashley made one last desperate lunge. She dropped to her knees in front of Tom, continuing to hold her son close to her with one arm. "Tom, I beg you, don't ruin everything completely. I'm guilty, but for the sake of our love, for the sake of all the years together, give me a chance to make amends. I'll do anything. Just don't leave. Don't deprive your son of his family." Tom looked down at her, tears rolling down his cheeks and dripping onto the floor. "We don't have a family anymore, Ashley." She shook her head. "Yes, you and I, here is our baby. We can start all over again." "Start over?" His voice broke into a hoarse laugh. "How to start over on ruins? How can I trust you after this?" I will prove that I deserve forgiveness," she babbled. "Let time pass, as much as it takes. Just don't leave us now." Tom sighed heavily, then carefully, without looking her in the eye, walked around Ashley, who was still kneeling, and headed towards the door. "Where are you going?" she asked in a breaking voice, turning around. "I'll find a place to spend the night," he answered quietly. "Maybe with friends. It doesn't matter." He reached for the door handle. Ashley cried out in panic. "What about us?" I'm alone now, alone with a baby." Tom stopped at the threshold without turning around. "You can handle it. You've always been strong." "Tom," Ashley wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. He stood for another second, then said in a muffled voice, "I'll come by in a couple of days to talk about next steps." "What do you mean?" She didn't understand. "About the divorce," he blurted out, his throat tightening. "And about the legal stuff. I have to think it through." Ashley let out a soft moan, as if she had been stabbed. Tom opened the door. The cold evening air rushed in. On the threshold, he hesitated for the last time. "Take care of yourself and him." With these words, Tom left, closing the door behind him. Ashley rushed to the window, frantically moving the curtain with her elbow. She was still holding her son with her other hand. She saw her husband's figure quickly cross the yard and disappear into the twilight, heading for the parked car. In an instant, the red lights of the headlights disappeared around the corner of the street. He left. Ashley stood in the middle of the living room, feeling unbearable pain fill her entire being. Desperation burned in her chest. She looked down at the baby, who began to whimper in response to her muffled sobs. "Hush, darling," she whispered, rocking her son. "Mommy is here. Don't cry." But her tears were choking her. Ashley sank down on the sofa, clutching the baby tightly to her, and burst into quiet, bitter sobs. In the empty house, no one heard her. Only the little boy looked at his mother with wide-open eyes, as if he also did not understand where the warm voice that had soothed him had gone. Ashley buried her face in her son's soft body. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She whispered through her tears, not knowing exactly to whom these words were addressed, to the baby, to her departed husband, or to herself. That's how the night found them. A lonely woman with a child in her arms, sitting in the darkness and realizing the full consequences of her mistakes. The first days without Tom dragged on painfully long. Ashley seemed to exist in some parallel world, a world where there was only a baby crying at night and herself, broken and alone. The morning after her husband left, she woke up from her son's scream, and for a split second, still half asleep, she reached out to the other side of the bed, expecting Tom to get up and pick up the baby. But her palm only felt a cold sheet. Reality rolled in again like a heavy burden. Ashley stood up, swaying from exhaustion, and picked up the baby. He was crying for food and a diaper change. She did it mechanically, trying not to cry again. "Now I'm the one responsible for everything," she repeated to herself. Day merged with night. Her son demanded attention almost around the clock. At first, Ashley was even grateful for this continuous employment. There was no time to think. But physically and emotionally, she quickly became exhausted. She did not have enough sleep, food she forgot to eat until the child fell asleep. Sometimes, when the baby fell asleep during the day, she put him in a cradle next to her on the sofa and just sat, staring into space, having no strength for anything. A few days later, a nurse came for a routine checkup of the child. She frowned, seeing Ashley's pale, exhausted appearance, and carefully asked if everything was okay. Ashley forced a smile and lied that it was just sleepless nights that were taking their toll. Her husband was often at work, but she was coping. The nurse advised her to ask her family for help and get more rest. Ashley nodded, seeing her to the door, and bitter irony was pouring out in her soul. What family? There was nowhere to expect help from. Jessica called her several times, but Ashley didn't answer. She didn't want to talk to anyone, much less the one who, albeit unintentionally, had tipped Tom off about her meeting with Chris. Jessica left a couple of messages, worried if everything was okay, asking for a call back. Ashley never called back. The only person she was forced to communicate with was her lawyer. A week after the breakup, Tom apparently decided not to drag it out. Notifications about the start of divorce proceedings arrived in the mail. Ashley's heart sank when she saw an envelope with his last name and first name in the plaintiff's column. Tom did not contact her directly, he acted through lawyers. It was painful, but expected. She signed the papers, barely reading them, trusting the conditions Tom laid out. To her relief, he made no claim to any property other than his own. He generously left the house to her and the child. Apparently, he simply wanted to break all ties as quickly as possible. And yet, reading the dry legal language of divorce for adultery, Ashley shuddered with shame. She wanted the paper to scream her remorse, but the ink heartlessly recorded her guilt. One night, the baby's temperature rose. Not very high, but Ashley, an inexperienced mother, was scared to death. The baby cried inconsolably. His little body was hot. She tried to remember advice from books, how to bring down the fever, whether to go to the hospital. There was no one nearby who could tell her. In a fit of despair, she grabbed the phone. Her fingers dialed Tom's number on their own. Beeps. Once, twice. At some point, he hung up. Ashley stared at the dark screen, knowing he didn't want to talk. He hadn't left to rush to the rescue now. Shaking with sobs, she found a thermometer and measured the baby's temperature. Only 37.8, not critical. She remembered that there were baby drops. With a trembling spoon, she gave him an antipyretic. Gradually, the baby calmed down and fell asleep, and Ashley, sitting over the cradle, mentally cursed herself. A little more, and she seemed to hate herself for everything. It was on that terrible night, when fear for the child's life mixed with complete hopelessness, that an unexpected thought popped into Ashley's head. There was another person who cared about this baby by blood, Chris. She met the thought with disgust at first. How could she even think about him, after everything that had happened, and who knew how he would react? Perhaps he had his own life and didn't need a child. But after a few days, the idea of letting Chris know had taken hold. Ashley reasoned to herself. He was the father, he had a right to know that he had a son, and she could perhaps get moral support from him at least. Not for herself, but for the child. The son should at least know who his real father was, even if he didn't want to be involved. Someday the boy would grow up and ask. These arguments gradually convinced her. Besides, it was all over with Tom. There was nothing left to protect, nothing to hide. It remained to figure out how to contact Chris. They had not spoken since that night. Ashley had avoided any news about him at first, and then she had no time for it. Now she found out that she had deleted his number, but there was a social network. She went to his page with trembling hands. Her heart was pounding. What would she say? "Hi, you have a son." How absurd. But something had to be done. There were a few new posts on Chris's page, photos from concerts, humorous notes. He looked happy. Somewhere in California, judging by the geotags. Ashley typed a quick personal message. "We need to talk. This is important." And hit send before she chickened out. She saw that the message was read almost immediately. It turned out he was online. But there was no response, not a minute, not an hour. Ashley sighed. Maybe he'd decided to ignore her, thought she was wasting her time texting. Maybe he was still mad that she'd cut off contact. However, the next morning the phone vibrated, indicating an incoming call from an unknown number. Ashley became wary. "Hello? Hi, it's me," a familiar voice said. Ashley's heart skipped a beat. "You said we needed to talk. What happened?" Chris sounded worried. She took a deep breath. "Hi, Chris. Thanks for calling." "Of course. I was surprised to hear from you at all. What happened? Are you okay?" There was genuine excitement in his voice. Ashley suddenly found it hard to speak. She looked at her baby, playing with his hands in the crib next to her. "Ash?" Chris repeated. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, I'm sorry. It's not easy for me to say this." She felt her mouth go dry. It would be better to meet in person. "Where are you now?" "I'm back in Denver for a couple of days. My dad's got some business here," he replied. "I can come over if you need me." Ashley's grip on the phone tightened. "Please come. Do you remember the address? We're home." Chris hesitated. The word "we" seemed to puzzle him. We? Okay, I'll be right there." Ashley gave the address again, just in case, even though he nodded that he remembered. As she hung up, she realized she was shaking. Well, the hour of reckoning wasn't over yet. She had one more person to expose now. Tell Chris he had a child, and listen to his answer, whatever it was. 40 minutes later, Ashley heard a car pull up outside the house. Her heart began to beat anxiously. She looked in the mirror in the hallway. Her face was pale. There were dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep and tears. There was no way to fix it. There was a knock at the door. Ashley carefully opened it. Chris was standing on the porch. In a leather jacket, jeans, dark hair slightly tousled by the wind. In his hands was a bouquet, several white lilies. He always remembered that she loved them. "Hello," he said uncertainly, looking at her. "Hello," she said quietly, stepping back and letting him in. "Come in." Chris stepped over the threshold, holding out the flowers. "I bought them on the way. I remember you loved lilies." "Thank you." Ashley took the bouquet automatically. The scent gently hit her nose, reminding her of the past. She led her guest into the living room and gestured for him to sit down. Chris looked around. He had been here before, when they were dating, but many years had passed. The decor had changed. Baby things had appeared, a crib in the corner, a colorful rug, diapers laid out on the chair. He couldn't help but notice these details. His face expressed growing amazement. He turned to Ashley. "Do you have a child?" Ashley clenched her hands, feeling a lump in her throat. This was the moment of truth. "Yes." Chris blinked, apparently not expecting this to begin. "You? Congratulations, I guess. You're a mother." He looked around again. "Is that the important thing you wanted to say? Isn't Tom happy? Or why are you so worried?" "Tom." Ashley sank down onto the edge of the couch. Her heart ached at the mere mention of her husband's name. "Tom's gone." "Gone?" Chris asked. "What do you mean?" "He doesn't live here anymore," she explained. "We broke up." Chris's eyes widened. He slowly sat down on the chair opposite him. "When? Why? You said he was great." Ashley smiled bitterly. "He was great, until I ruined it." "Ash, I don't understand anything," he said softly, leaning forward. "What happened?" Ashley took a deep breath, steeling herself. "What happened was I had a son, and Tom found out he wasn't his own." There was a pause. Chris looked at her intently, as if trying to put together a puzzle. Then his face suddenly turned pale. "Wait." He stopped short, covering his mouth with his hand for a few seconds. "Are you saying?" Ashley nodded, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, Chris, he's your son." Chris leaned back in his chair as if he'd been punched. He looked at the crib, then back at Ashley. "Damn," he whispered. "My son, are you sure?" "The DNA test confirmed it wasn't Tom," she said, wiping away tears. "And there was no one else but you two." Chris ran his hands over his face, then stood up nervously and began pacing the room. "Why? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" There was an accusatory note in his voice. Ashley stood up too, pressing her hands to her chest. I myself didn't fully believe that it wasn't Tom's. I really wanted everything to be different. That's why I kept quiet." Chris stopped, staring at the floor. "Oh my God, Ash, I have a baby." He looked up at her. "How old is he now?" "2 weeks," she answered. He shook his head, trying to comprehend. 2 weeks. And Tom left because of that? "Yes, he couldn't forgive my deception. And I understand him." Ashley's voice trembled. "I'm to blame for everything." Chris came closer, impulsively took her by the shoulders. You're alone with the baby now, right? I'm sorry, it's my fault. This is all because of me." Ashley smiled bitterly through her tears. "We're both to blame." He let go of her and walked over to the crib. He looked at the sleeping baby. The baby just stirred, opened his eyes, looked at the stranger, and yawned again. Chris watched in amazement. "Is this a boy?" he asked quietly. "A boy," Ashley confirmed, coming up next to him. "What? What's his name?" She looked down. "I don't know yet. Tom and I haven't had time to decide." To be honest, she hadn't been thinking about a name these past few weeks. In the official documents, all that was listed was foster boy. Chris nodded absently. He looked at the child for a few more seconds, then ran his hand through his hair, clearly nervous. "Listen, all this is, of course, unexpected. I don't even know what to say." Ashley felt her heart clench at his tone. There was no joy, no particular warmth, just shock and confusion. "I don't need formal words from you," she said quietly. "I called you because you have a right to know. And because I didn't know who else to turn to." Chris turned to her. "Convert? You want me to? What?" He was clearly afraid that she would now ask him to become a father to this child. Ashley saw it in his eyes. "I'm not asking for anything more than you decide for yourself," she said with difficulty. "I understand that you have your own life, but now you have a son, and I can't cope alone, to be honest." The last words came out in a whisper. Chris stepped toward her as if to console her, but then froze, struggling with himself. "Ashley," he said carefully. I didn't expect this. Of course, I feel responsible. But you see, I'm not ready. Do you think I'm ready? She smiled sadly through her tears. I didn't plan this either. But he is. And he needs a father, Chris. Chris shook his head, retreating. I don't know how to be a father. I'm on tour, traveling. I can barely keep myself together, and then there's a child. There was panic in his voice. Ashley knew it would be like that, but it still cut to the quick. I'm not asking you to become a model family man, she said colder. As you can see, there is no family anymore. Just decide for yourself whether you want to participate in the boy's life. Chris bit his lip, looking painfully from her to his son. Damn, I don't know. I need to think. This is all so complicated. Of course, Ashley nodded. Think about it. Just know, I'm not holding you back. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just maybe don't show up at all later, so as not to confuse the kid. She tried to speak calmly, but her voice betrayed her resentment. Chris flared up. Are you asking the question bluntly? Ashley rubbed her temples tiredly. No, I'm sorry. You have the right to choose. I just don't want any more lies and uncertainty. You're either in his life or you're not. Chris turned away, angrily kicking the leg of the sofa with his toe. Damn it, Ashley. This is my child. I can't just forget about him like he doesn't exist. Then what do you suggest? She asked quietly. He fell silent. For a long time, the only sounds in the room were the ticking of the clock and the snoring of the baby. Finally, Chris exhaled. I can't handle it. I just know myself. I'll ruin everything. I'll hurt you again. I'll ruin the boy's life. Ashley wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the cold. Understand. Chris turned and looked at her pleadingly. Forgive me. If I hadn't dragged you into this again then, you would have been happy with him and the child would have had a better father. It's too late to talk, she shrugged, trying to hold back her tears. It's already happened. Chris lowered his head. Yeah, too late. He approached the cradle again and gently touched his son's tiny hand with his finger. The baby moved, but did not wake up. He's beautiful, Chris whispered. I hope. You can give him everything. I'll try, Ashley answered dryly. Chris pulled his hand back and stepped back decisively. I guess I better leave. It's the right thing to do. Ashley nodded silently, not looking at him. Chris froze at the door. If you need anything money there or something else, just tell me, okay? I'll send it. Ashley closed her eyes. Money, as if that could replace her father. Don't worry, we'll manage. Chris stood there for a moment longer, as if expecting her to stop him. But Ashley remained silent, looking at the floor. Then he quietly opened the door. Goodbye, Ash. She looked at him one last time. Chris had tears in his eyes. He quickly turned away and left. Ashley closed the door behind him and leaned her back against it. The lilies he had given her were still lying on the coffee table, smelling sweet. Ashley looked at them through a veil of tears and thought how symbolic it was. Beautiful gestures that changed nothing. Chris was gone too. Now for good. She was completely alone. Days passed by. The house was completely empty. Tom did not show up in person. All communication was limited to official letters through lawyers. He took his things when Ashley was not home. She guessed this by the loss of his clothes and a couple of personal items. He preferred to avoid a personal meeting, but it was for the best. She did not know what to say anyway. Now Ashley had only her little son and the silence of empty rooms. At first, she felt on the verge of madness. Sometimes, rocking the crying baby at night, she thought, I wish all this was a nightmare and I'll wake up next to Tom. But the morning brought the same reality. Her husband was gone. There was no help. Chris's departure added a new wound. Although he had reacted more gently than Tom, no yelling, no blaming, the result was the same. He was gone too. Ashley didn't know if he would contact her. She hadn't heard from him yet, and she was trying not to get her hopes up. One day, she finally decided to answer Jessica, who was persistently calling. Her friend literally rushed to her house half an hour later, clearly worried. "Ashley," Jessica hugged her impulsively at the door. "I was going crazy wondering why you disappeared." Ashley smiled sadly, inviting her in. "Sorry, I needed to be alone." Jessica immediately noticed Tom's absence, and the crib. The questions in her eyes were not long in coming. They sat down in the kitchen. Ashley poured tea, although her hands were shaking. She decided to tell her friend everything, except for Chris's name, but Jessica had probably guessed it herself. Jessica listened in shock, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God, Ashley, why didn't you tell me before?" Ashley shrugged wearily. "What difference would it make? I did it myself." I, I don't even know what to say." Jessica shook her head. "I'm so sorry. Tom, is he done for good?" "Yes," Ashley answered quietly. "There will be a divorce." Jessica took her hand. "And you're all alone with the baby. Look, you can count on me. I'll help you any way I can." Ashley squeezed her friend's fingers gratefully, feeling the warmth of support warming her empty heart just a little. Over the next few weeks, Jessica did indeed visit frequently. She brought ready-made meals, helped with babysitting so Ashley could take a shower or just take a nap. Ashley initially refused, feeling like she didn't deserve such kindness. But her friend insisted. "Stop beating yourself up already," Jessica said sternly, rocking the crying boy in her arms. "You should be thinking about him, not the past. Everyone makes mistakes." Ashley smiled sadly in response. Not all mistakes lead to such consequences. But Jessica was right about the main thing. The main thing now is the child. Slowly, day by day, life entered a new rhythm. Ashley learned to get by on a minimum of sleep, catching short periods of rest at the same time as her son. She figured out how to quickly change diapers, even if the baby was screaming his head off. She began to carve out time to cook simple meals for herself. She needed to maintain her strength. Breastfeeding required calories. Sometimes in the evenings, after putting her son to bed, Ashley would sit by the window with a cup of tea and sink into heavy thoughts. Life on the street went on as usual. Neighbors were walking their dogs, people were returning from work. Some had happy families, children were laughing. All she had was a quiet room behind her and worries about the future. What awaits them next? Maternity leave will soon end, and they will have to think about going back to work. Ashley could not imagine how she would manage everything. Financially, she was still holding on to savings and a small allowance, but she could not hold on like that forever. She would need a nanny or a creche in the future. A nanny means money. A creche means money too. One such evening, she received an email from Tom. The subject line was dryly written, "Divorce and property settlements." Ashley's hands shook as she opened it. In the letter, Tom, in a business-like tone, informed her that all the papers had been signed, he was giving up his right to the house, and wished her and the baby well. Nothing personal, just business. At the end, there was only a note. "It would be best if we did not keep in touch. Take care, Tom." Ashley read these lines through tears. That was it. The family was gone, the love had evaporated, all that was left were wishes for health, as if to a stranger. Well, she was a stranger to him now. However, strangely, after this letter she felt relief. Perhaps because the anticipation of the end was worse than the end itself. Now the period was set. She was free to go further, but where? In the following days, she tried to focus on the current concerns. The boy was growing, changing almost every day. He would make a new grimace, then start focusing his gaze on a toy. Ashley caught herself smiling for the first time, looking at his achievements. This smile was still mixed with sadness, but still sincere joy for her son. One morning, awakened by the baby's babble, he wasn't crying, but cooing in his crib, she found herself at peace. The pain hadn't gone away, no, it had just gotten quieter, it had stopped screaming, and now it was just a quiet whine. And above that pain, a new feeling was rising, determination. She walked up to the mirror in the bedroom and looked at her reflection. Her face had grown thin. Her hair was somehow pulled back. Her eyes were stamped with the experience. But there was something else, too. She had survived. She had been through hell and hadn't broken. I must go on living, she thought, for his sake. Taking her son in her arms, she hugged him. The baby looked at her seriously and trustingly. He was used to his mother always being there, that she would protect and feed him. He knew nothing about her mistakes and sins. For him, she was the whole world. "I won't let you down, son," Ashley whispered, stroking his soft hair. "I promise." Saying it out loud, she felt something inside her fall into place. Yes, she was left without love, without the support of a man. But she has a son, and he is her responsibility and a chance to atone in some sense for at least part of her guilt, doing everything to make his life happy. For the first time in a long time, my soul felt a little lighter. 6 months passed. Ashley's life gradually acquired a new stability, perhaps not at all the one she once dreamed of, but still stable on small daily supports. In the morning, she woke up to the cheerful cooing of her son. He was now about 7 months old, and every morning he greeted her with a smile from his crib. Ashley picked up the baby in her arms, and they went to the kitchen. While she made herself coffee with one hand, she held her son on her hip with the other. Porridge for him was warming up on the stove, the usual bustle of a young mother. Then there was a rush to get ready, a bag with diapers, bottles, a toy. She packed all of this, preparing to take the baby to the nursery at the work center. Returning to work, Ashley arranged a place in a daycare group for employees with children. The first few days she was terribly worried, leaving her son with strangers, but gradually calmed down. The teachers there turned out to be good, and the office was nearby she could run at any time. Having driven herself to work, Ashley took another step forward. At first, it was difficult to get into the work rhythm. At first, everything fell out of her hands. Her head was filled with thoughts about the child, and the ghosts of the past were still alive. Of course, her colleagues found out about her divorce. Rumors spread quickly in the team. But no one pestered her with questions, seeing that the topic was painful. Jessica, who worked nearby, protected Ashley from curious people in every possible way. Gradually, work even became a distraction. The day would pass meetings, deadlines, coffee with colleagues, and for a few hours Ashley would barely remember her pain. And in the evening, picking up her son from the nursery, hurrying home along the evening street, she would once again immerse herself in her new main role mother. In the evenings, she and the baby played on the rug. He was already sitting confidently and trying to crawl, comically sticking out his bottom and comically coordinating his hands. Ashley laughed, watching how persistently he reached for the rattle. Sometimes in these moments she caught herself in pure happiness, unclouded by anything, just the happiness of looking at her child. Of course, at night she still felt sad. Sometimes she would wake up, thinking that there was someone in the other half of the bed half asleep. She would forget that no one was lying next to her anymore. Sometimes her heart would still squeeze from memories. Some scenes with Tom would suddenly pop up. Here, they are laughing on the beach during their vacation. Here he is giving her a bouquet on their anniversary. Or the image of Chris, how he sang on stage that evening. These images no longer caused a sharp mental spasm, but responded with a dull pain of regret. Ashley didn't push these thoughts away. She let them come and go like waves. Yes, she had a beautiful past with Tom, and she had destroyed it. Yes, she had a passionate moment with Chris, and it had turned into the collapse of her entire life. All of this was part of her history, and she had to learn to live with it. One day, while cleaning out a closet, she came across a wedding album. The snow-white cover with gold letters was gathering dust in the far corner. Ashley hesitated for a long time to open it. But then she sat down at the kitchen table in the evening, when her son had fallen asleep, and turned the pages. The young couple was shining in the photographs, she and Tom, so happy, so cloudless. Ashley couldn't hold back her tears, but they were quiet tears, without hysteria, just sadness about what couldn't be returned. If only I knew then how it would all turn out, she thought, but the past can't be changed. She closed the album and stood up. She didn't take the photos off the walls. Tom had taken almost all the family photos, only those where they were in the company of friends remained. She decided to leave them. After all, this is part of her history, and her son has the right to see what his father was like, even if not his biological father, but the one who waited for his birth. On the mantelpiece sat a photograph of them on a hike with the mountains in the background, the same one she had once admired over breakfast. The frame lay face down now, but Ashley picked it up, blew the dust off it, and carefully put it back in the box. Too personal, too painful to leave it for now. Maybe someday, many years from now, she would be able to look at them without pain. But for now, it was too early. In the middle of winter, her son got his first tooth. Ashley was so happy about it, as if she had won a prize. She showed everyone at work a photo of him with a tiny white tooth, barely noticeable on his gum. Her colleagues were touched, and she beamed with pride. She absorbed every new moment of the baby's development like a sponge, the first ma, or did she imagine it that way? The first confident crawl, the first time he tried to stand up, holding on to the sofa. In those moments, she knew for sure, this is worth living for. Of course, the difficulties did not disappear. She was still sometimes exhausted to the point of tears. It was especially hard when both she and her son caught a cold at the same time. Both had a fever, but she still had to take care of him. But she coped, they recovered, got by. There were also bouts of loneliness. Sometimes I just wanted to talk to someone in the evening, share my son's joys, or complain about being tired. Jessica helped out, but her friend had her own life. You can't bother her every time. Sometimes Ashley herself called her mother, who supported her with words, but she couldn't fly in to visit. Health problems did not allow it. Ashley learned to be her own supporter. She realized that she couldn't rely on any of the men in her story. One wrote her off, another chickened out in the face of responsibility. Well, that makes it all the more important to be strong for her son. Late one February evening, after putting her baby to bed, Ashley went out into the yard for a short while to get some fresh air. The starry sky stretched out above her. The frosty air nipped at her cheeks. She looked up and suddenly thought that it had been a long time since she had felt this quiet sadness without despair. The losses will stay with her forever, but they will no longer paralyze her. The most important thing now is the present, the little man, peacefully snoring in his crib, and the stars in the sky are still as beautiful as when she was carrying her newborn son home from the maternity hospital at night, full of hope. Hopes have collapsed, but the beauty of the world remains, and the meaning of life also remains in her hands every day. Ashley took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. She felt that with each breath, the helpless despair that had threatened to engulf her immediately after everything was slowly fading away. It was replaced by a calm determination and resignation to what she could not change. She had many years of raising her son ahead of her. Perhaps someday she would meet a man who would accept her with her past. Or maybe not. She no longer tried to guess. She knew one thing: she would no longer lie to herself or others. The price of lies was too high. Now her path is truth and responsibility, no matter how hard they are. Ashley decided to celebrate her son's first birthday modestly with close friends. Over the past few months, she had built up a small support team. Jessica, a couple of office mates who were also mothers. They volunteered to help organize a small tea party for the birthday boy. By spring, the baby had grown stronger, started to stand on his feet, holding on to a support, and briskly babbled sets of syllables. Ashley couldn't be happier with him. Preparations for the holiday took her the whole evening before. She baked a sugar-free carrot cake, especially for the birthday boy, blew up colorful balloons, hung a garland, "Happy Birthday." While decorating the living room, Ashley found herself with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, she was happy. Her boy was 1 year old. He was growing up healthy and happy. On the other, she was sad. The child's father, the one she had once dreamed of raising children with, was not around. On the day of the celebration, Jessica and her husband, she had recently gotten married, and wedding bells were ringing on everyone's lips. Her colleague Martha with her 2-year-old daughter, and the neighbor downstairs, the elderly Mrs. Green, who always showed concern and looked after the baby when Ashley needed to run out on business, came. A small company filled the house with excitement. The children were noisy. The adults drank a cup of tea with a pie. Ashley held the birthday boy in her arms, helping him blow out the candle one on the cupcake. Everyone clapped. The little boy looked at the fire, enchanted. "Make a wish for him, Mom," Mrs. Green smiled. Ashley closed her eyes for a moment. A wish. It was one, simple and unattainable, to return what was lost. But she pushed the thought away. No, her wishes were different now. She wished for her son a happy fate in which he would never repeat the mistakes of his parents. When the guests had left and the apartment was empty again, Ashley put the tired birthday boy to bed. Earlier, she had bought him a small gift, a soft teddy bear, which he had already managed to hug and did not want to let go. Now the bear was lying next to him in the crib, and the baby was snoring, his nose buried in its ear. Ashley quietly closed the door to the nursery and returned to the living room. The balloons were still swinging under the ceiling, reminding of the past holiday. There was unfinished tea and plates with scraps of pie on the table. She sat down on the sofa, feeling pleasantly tired. A year. A whole year has passed since her life turned upside down completely. Then, holding her newborn son in her arms, she thought she wouldn't be able to bear it. But she did. The baby grew up, and she managed alone. And although there were still many difficulties ahead, now she believed everything would be fine. Not perfect, not like in a fairy tale, but fine in the real sense when you just live and enjoy what you have. Ashley stood up and went to the dresser, took a beautiful carved box from the bottom drawer. That was where she kept her most memorable things. Opening the lid, she saw, on top lay a tiny bracelet from the maternity hospital with her son's name and date of birth. She also kept the tag that was put on her father's hand, Tom, then put one on as a close relative. Swallowing with difficulty a lump in her throat, Ashley carefully put these tags in an envelope. Beneath them lay an old photograph of her and Tom on the day of the ultrasound, happy, holding the image of the embryo. That smile of Tom's, so genuine. Ashley gently ran her finger over his image. "I'm sorry," she whispered quietly, unable to hold back her tears. Behind the photo lay a folded, yellowed sheet of paper, the text of her wedding vows, a sketch. She had written it hastily, nervous before the ceremony. The last line read, "I promise to always be honest with you." How bitter it was the other way around. Ashley put the piece of paper back. At the very bottom of the box was a small card. A card from Chris, about 5 years ago, on her birthday, with the inscription, "Always yours." A lie that seemed true at the time. She kept the card anyway as a reminder of her wild youth, when feelings overwhelmed her mind. As Ashley sorted through these relics, she realized that she was no longer crying. She was sad, but calm. The past cannot be changed, and it cannot be thrown away completely, and she did not want to throw it away. There were bright moments in the past for which she was grateful to fate. She had experienced love twice, different, but still love. She had experienced joy and pain. All this made her who she is today. She closed the box and put it back in the drawer. Perhaps when her son grew up, she would have a lot to explain to him. Why he didn't have a dad, why it had happened. Ashley didn't know what words to choose, but she was determined not to lie to him. He needed to know the truth as much as he was ready to understand. Later in the evening, she opened her laptop. She hadn't been on social media for a long time. She had no time for that. But today, after the holiday, she wanted to close some unfinished gestalts. She opened Chris's page. He was still posting frequently about his life. His latest was, "Thank you, Seattle, that was amazing," and a photo of him on stage in front of a crowd of fans. He was still living the dream, just like before. No mention of a baby. Well, she hadn't expected him to be public about that. Ashley wondered if she should write him anything. On the one hand, he had made his choice. He had decided not to participate. On the other hand, maybe his conscience sometimes bothered him, and he would be glad to know how his son was doing. She wrote briefly, "His first birthday is today. He is a healthy, strong boy. Just wanted you to know." The answer came a few minutes later. "Thank you for writing. I'm happy for him. Forgive me." Ashley stared at those three phrases for a long time. Forgive me. What exactly was he apologizing for? Everything, probably. She could have said a lot, but she decided it was better to let it go. Take care, she typed back and closed her laptop. That was it. The matter with Chris was over too. She held no grudge after all. If it weren't for his weakness, she wouldn't have her son. At night, as she was going to bed, Ashley would talk to herself in her head. She had been doing this a lot lately, imagining that she was writing a diary or a letter to nowhere. And so a year has passed. A difficult year, but I coped. I do not ask fate for forgiveness. I made mistakes myself, and I pay for them myself. I just hope that I will be able to raise my boy with dignity and he will be happy. I accept everything that happened. This is my life with all its burden. Living with this burden is not easy, but I have learned to bear it and even smile along the way. I will never get back the love I lost, but I will always remember it. It will be my responsibility and maybe my punishment to remember and not forget. But I want to believe that there will be new joys ahead for me and my son. Small or big, it doesn't matter. We will cope. Now I know the price of lies, and I will never compromise the truth again, neither to myself nor to those I love. She closed her eyes, feeling the weariness take over. For the first time, these thoughts did not torment her, but brought her relief. She did not need any external redemption, not Tom's forgiveness, he would not grant it. Not Chris's return, she did not want that. All she needed was the strength to move on and raise her son with integrity and dignity, and she had that strength. A nightlight glowed softly on the nightstand. Ashley glanced at the framed photo of her son, a close-up of him laughing. A smile appeared on her lips. She kissed the photo with her fingertips and whispered, "Good night, darling." Her voice sounded quiet but confident in the empty room. That was how the day ended. The day she finally said goodbye to the past and looked to the future without fear. 5 years later, the bright September sun shone softly from a clear sky. The courtyard of Denver Elementary School was crowded with children with backpacks and parents chatting animatedly. Today was a special day, the first day of school for first graders. Ashley stood a little to the side, watching her son, a tall, smiling boy, meet the other kids. He was a little shy, clutching his new Spider-Man backpack to his chest. But when he noticed that the other boy also liked superheroes, he started talking to him cheerfully. Ashley's heart ached with pride and excitement. Just yesterday, he was a baby in her arms, and today, here he is, an independent little man, taking his first step into adult life. She wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. "Mom, look, this is my friend." The son ran up to her for a minute, beaming with a smile, and pulled the black-haired boy along with him. "This is Alex. He loves the spider too." "Hey," Ashley crouched down, smiling at both of them. "Hi, Alex. It's so nice to meet you. You'll be going to school together now, can you imagine?" Alex nodded gravely. Ashley's son giggled, grabbed his friend's hand, and ran to the circle of kids, where the teacher began lining them up. Ashley stood up. Jessica, her old friend, and now the mother of her son's classmate, was standing next to her. It so happened that the children were born a couple of months apart and went to the same class. Jessica waved to Ashley as she pulled up to the school a little later, pushing a stroller with her 1-year-old second child in front of her. Jessica's life had turned out well after her marriage, and Ashley was sincerely happy for her. "Our kids are all grown up," Jessica sighed, standing next to Ashley. "You never know, before we know it, it'll be graduation." "Oh, don't rush things," Ashley smiled. "I'm not ready to be the mother of a high school senior yet. I need to survive the first grader." They looked at each other and laughed. Jessica squeezed her friend's elbow lightly. "You're great, you know?" Ashley raised her eyebrows questioningly. "Why the compliments all of a sudden?" "It's just," Jessica nodded at Ashley's boy. "Look at how smart and kind he is. You've put so much into him alone. I remember how hard it was for you, and now." Ashley looked warmly at her son in the distance. He just looked back, found her gaze among the parents, and waved happily. She waved back. "Thank you," she answered Jessica quietly. "But I'm not alone, I have friends like you." Jessica smiled and, seeing her daughter calling her, stepped away for a minute. Ashley glanced around the schoolyard. Everywhere, happy moms and dads were taking pictures of their first graders. A red-haired man picked up a little girl with bows, and she gave him a loud kiss on the cheek as everyone laughed. Nearby, a young mother was laughing and adjusting her son's tie, while his father was filming everything on his phone. For a moment, Ashley's heart skipped a beat. On a day like this, maybe Matthew's father could be there with him. But she gently pushed the thought away. "We're fine the way we are," she firmly reminded herself. Ashley's soul was filled with a wonderful peace at that moment. She couldn't say that life had become easy. No, being a single mother was still not easy. There were days when she was exhausted, getting ready in the morning, then work, the child's clubs, lessons, cooking, cleaning. But over the years, she had gotten used to it. She had gotten the hang of it. And most importantly, she had found harmony with herself. The feeling of guilt no longer haunted her every moment like a shadow. Of course, she did not forget why everything turned out the way it did, and she never did. But she learned not to live in the past. She accepted that one mistake can change her whole life, but it does not have to destroy it. Sometimes Ashley saw Tom from a distance. It turned out that the world was small. A couple of times she accidentally ran into him on the streets of the city. They did not communicate. Tom pretended not to notice her, and she did not try to attract his attention. A mixture of awkwardness and coldness flashed in his gaze when he turned away. These short meetings always left a bitter aftertaste in Ashley, but without that sharp pain. She understood and was not angry. He had the right to avoid her. Perhaps he had a new family, or simply his own life, and she wished him well silently from a distance. She knew almost nothing about Chris. Sometimes she heard rumors through friends of friends that he had released a new album or was spotted with another passion. Ashley took such news calmly. At first, she thought that over time Chris might want to see his son, but this did not happen. Her son grew up, and at some point he inevitably asked a question that made Ashley's heart clench. Why do other kids have dads, but he doesn't? The first time this happened was when Matthew was about 4. In kindergarten, they were doing crafts for Father's Day, and he brought home a homemade card, timidly asking, "Mom, what should I do with this? I have no one to give it to." Ashley then sat down next to him, hugged her son, and quietly replied that his dad lived very far away and could not be with them. She said that sometimes it happened, but it did not mean that Matthew was any less loved. "You have me, and I love you for both," she whispered, kissing the boy on the top of his head. Matthew thought for a long time, clinging to her, and then nodded seriously. He did not understand everything yet, but he felt her love, and that was enough for him. For now, that explanation was enough. When the boy grew older and questions arose again, she would tell him the truth carefully, without denigrating either Tom or especially Chris. It would be another test for her, but she was determined to be honest with her son. The teacher began the roll call. Ashley listened with bated breath as her son's name was pronounced, now a schoolboy. She remembered how they had chosen his name, long and carefully. In the end, she named the boy Matthew, a gift from God. No matter how her fate turned out, her son was truly a gift, albeit one that came at such a price. "Matthew Foster," the teacher said loudly. Ashley's boy confidently answered, "I do," and stepped forward. Ashley felt tears of happiness welling up in her eyes. She furtively wiped them away so that her son wouldn't notice he was already so independent. He didn't like it when his mother was a whiner. The column of children, talking and waving to their parents, began to move toward the school entrance. Ashley, along with the other adults, followed, watching her boy. At the very porch, Matthew looked back once more, found her, and blew a kiss. She caught it with a gesture and put her hand to her heart. "See you after school," she called out with a smile. As the school door closed behind the little ones, the parents gradually began to disperse. Many had tears in their eyes, of course. The children were growing up. Jessica waved to Ashley, indicating that she would call her later, and rolled her stroller home. Ashley stood by the fence, unable to leave right away. She remembered another day, 5 years ago, when she had stood on the threshold of her house with a bundle of blood in her arms, and the whole world was crumbling around her. Then it had seemed to her that there was only darkness ahead, and now she stood on the threshold of the school, letting her son go on a new journey, and she saw the light clearly. Yes, the path here was strewn with pain, regrets, sleepless nights of despair, but she walked along it, stumbling and falling, but still came to this morning, the morning when the heart is filled with pride for her boy. Ashley sighed, taking one last look at the school building. Then she turned and headed toward the parking lot, where the daily routine awaited her. Work, shopping, and in the evening, checking homework, even if it was the first, easiest ones. The ordinary life she had built anew from the rubble. Getting into the car, Ashley caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face had aged a little, small wrinkles had appeared around her eyes, but her gaze had become more confident and calm. She saw a woman who knew the value of her mistakes and her victories. "Everything will be fine," she said quietly to her reflection and smiled softly. There was no naivety in these words, only the firm confidence of a man who has accepted himself and his responsibility. Ashley started the engine and pulled out of the school parking lot to face the new day. The morning sun bathed the city in golden light, blinding her eyes. Ashley pulled down the visor, squinting. She had to stop at work, catch up on some errands, and then ask her son about his first school experiences that evening. Nothing out of the ordinary, just life. The same life she had once nearly destroyed, but had managed to rebuild. She no longer feared the future. Now she was paving the way for it. She now remembered the past without malice or bitterness, perhaps with a slight sadness and regret for what she had done. But she no longer tormented herself. The old Ashley who had made a fatal mistake was left behind. Her path had ended, and the new Ashley was moving forward. Now the meaning of her life was to raise her son as a worthy person and to become better every day than she had been yesterday. She didn't know what the future would hold for them. But she was sure of one thing. No matter what happened, she would never betray herself or those she loved again. She had been punished for her deception in full and had learned her lesson. And so she had an honest life ahead of her, if not an easy one, in which she created her own destiny. And that was enough to feel truly free. Ashley switched the radio to her favorite station and quietly sang along to the song playing. She hadn't sung like that for a long time from the heart and without sadness. A slight smile appeared on her face when the car gently turned the corner, taking her away to a new chapter in her life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.